Welcome to endocrinology series. This is video number 1, principles of endocrinology. This is supposed to be a conceptual gateway to every module that follows. Before we discuss any specific gland or hormone or disease, we really need to understand the mental model that makes all of that coherent. I have always been a big believer in foundational knowledge, and this is basically first principles thinking and learning. After that, after understanding the foundations of any concept or any topic or any mechanism, medicine or outside medicine, you build details on that solid foundation. This might be, for some people, appearing so simplistic and excessively simplified, but I think it's still organizes and structures your thinking around this topic of endocrinology. Endocrinology is one of the good examples of when you understand the basics and the principles, it stays with you and you can use it in any clinical situation, exam, any relevant situation. Okay? Because the principles explains a lot of the details. Okay? Now, what is the central question here? What are we looking for? The central question on studying endocrinology is how does the body coordinate the activity of organs that are centimeters or meters apart from one another? How do they talk to each other? That question is the reason that endocrine system exists. So that's what we are going to find out about endocrinology and cellular communication. This part is about comparing the two control systems in our bodies, the nervous system and the endocrine system. This is how our bodily functions and mechanisms and biochemical processes and everything are controlled. So we have two control systems. Understanding why it needs both is the single most important foundation of this series. If we have such an elaborate structure called the nervous system, why do we need the endocrine system? Okay, let's start by the nervous system. Nervous system is fast and local. It communicates in milliseconds across synaptic clefts measured in nanometers. Its signals are electrical and it's built for precision and speed. Think of the nervous system as the body's text message, immediate, direct, and targeted to a specific recipient. Now, the endocrine system is slow and diffuse. It communicates in minutes to hours to days and even decades via the bloodstream. Its signals are chemical and it's built for sustained whole body coordination. Things like metabolism, growth, reproduction, stress adaptation. Think of the endocrine system as the body's radio broadcast. It reaches every cell simultaneously, continuously, and can maintain its effect over days. Together, these two systems allow a complex organism like ourselves to maintain homeostasis. And we'll come to know what homeostasis is and other definitions. And it can respond to its environment across every time scale, from milliseconds through the reflexes of the nervous system to decades-long processes of growth and puberty governed by the endocrine system. Neither is sufficient alone, okay? Both are necessary, and by the way, they are connected through a structure called the hypothalamus. It's a brain structure. It acts as a link between the nervous system and the endocrine system. This structure has both neurological function and endocrine function. And we'll come to know about the hypothalamus in length in upcoming videos. I just wanted to introduce this very important link this time in this video. Now, to build a foundation, we need to understand what every one of these terms mean. For example, what is a hormone? A hormone is a chemical messenger. It's secreted by specialized cells into the bloodstream. Please note this definition and this wording because every word has a meaning. To exert its effects on distant target cells. Then comes the second part of this definition, which is it's receptor dependent. This is crucial. This same hormone circulates everywhere, but only the cells that express the correct receptor respond to it. Receptor expression is how the endocrine system achieves tissue selectivity without physical wiring, without that tissue being actually attached to the gland. Okay, so this is another very important information about hormones. They require receptors to exert their effects into the target tissue. Okay, now there is another important definition that I need understand people to understand. Endocrine versus exocrine. An endocrine gland is a ductless gland. The word gland means it's the tissue that secretes something, okay? Tissue in the form of an organ that secretes some chemical. This secretion can go directly into the bloodstream, and in this case, we call it endocrine, or it can use a duct or a network of tubes to collect the secretion and pour it somewhere in surface or a lumen. And this, in case, we call it exocrine. So I want people to be clear about these definitions. The endocrine gland is a gland that secretes its chemicals directly into the bloodstream. It uses the blood as a vehicle to carry this chemical around, and it usually exerts its effect on a distant tissue, or a tissue that's not necessarily at the vicinity of the gland itself. An exocrine gland, in the other hand, is a gland that uses a duct or a tube to deliver its product to a surface or a lumen, like salivary glands, for example. Okay? For people to understand this difference, let's compare, or let's talk about the pancreas. The pancreas is a special gland. It's actually a mixture of multiple glandular tissue. Part of it is exocrine, and this part is the part that participates in digestion, the part that secretes digestive enzymes. And these digestive enzymes comes out of the pancreatic acini, and these are the units that form the exocrine portion of the pancreas. But it also has an endocrine part, okay? We call it, for example, islets of Langerhans. This is one of these collection of cells that secrete hormones that are secreted directly into the blood. One of them is the islets of Langerhans. This is the endocrine part, okay? And we will talk about the pancreas in length in one of the videos. But for now, I just wanted to, for people to pay attention to these kinds of definitions and important nomenclature. Now, besides endocrine and exocrine, which are two big variety of glands, we have other modes of secreting chemicals. And one of these modes is called paracrine or paracrine. The paracrine, para means close to or nearby. Para, okay? So paracrine signaling acts on neighboring cells locally, meaning the secretion itself doesn't have to enter the bloodstream to reach the target cell. It can reach the target cell directly because the tissues, the gland and the tissue are neighbors, okay? In some way, we can consider synaptic neurotransmitters that travel between the presynaptic and the postsynaptic neurons can be paracrined somehow. Two different cells. One of them is a secreting cell. The other one is a recipient cell. And there is a small gap between them. Okay? There is no need to enter the bloodstream. There is another term which is called autocrine. Autocrine signaling means, auto means self or same. Okay? Autocrine signaling acts on the cell that produced the signal on itself. The cell producing a chemical that actually acts on itself. And these modes are important in the, for example, when we come to talk about the endocrine portion of the pancreas in the islet of Langerhans, we have these paracrine and autocrine signaling, which actually helps to control or regulate the enzyme production. Also, this signaling, form of signaling, is important in tumor biology. And by the way, tumor and oncological knowledge expanded significantly. And one of the very important areas of study or topic, proteins. And the class of hormone, by the way, tells a lot about its behavior. Now, when you study a hormone, if you are studying for an exam or anything, you really need to know this about the hormone. What chemical class? And I will explain why. The hormones that belong to this class, peptides or proteins, include insulin, famously, growth hormone, TSH, ACTH, PTH, ADH, and so on. They are water soluble. And please just note this part. Being a peptide and being water soluble has implications in the behavior of the hormone. The first implication is it can travel in the blood, in the plasma vehicle. That's one part. The second part about being water soluble is this chemical messenger needs to exert its effect on a cell. And being water soluble means it cannot cross the lipid bilayer. It needs either a channel or a receptor, okay, or a carrier protein to cross the lipid bilayer. So these proteins, which are peptides or proteins, require receptors on the surface of the cell. Their effect begins within minutes, immediate effect. The minute they attach themselves to the receptor, they start being active, or they activate a cascade. And also short-lived, because the second messengers are rapidly degraded and the signaling cascade turning off the effect of the hormone. Okay? So these are the important things that you need to remember about peptides and proteins. And the water solubility explains a lot of its behavior. Now, the second chemical class is called steroids. And these include things like cortisol, aldosterone, testosterone, estradiol, progesterone, and even vitamin D, the activated form of vitamin D, which is called calcitriol. They share the fact that they are derived from cholesterol. Cholesterol is the backbone. Being derivatives of cholesterol is one of the lipid molecules, so it's lipid soluble by definition. They don't need a surface receptor to be able to communicate with the cell. They can go directly, enter through the lipid bilayer because they are lipid soluble. But moving in the blood is a problem. And usually there is a balance between the protein-bound portion of that steroid and the free form of it. Usually the active form is the free form, okay? And since they don't need membrane receptors, they have what we call intracellular receptors. Together, this hormone receptor complex then acts as a transcription factor, binding to hormone response elements on the DNA and altering gene expression. You see? Now we are talking influencing long-term processes, gene expression. This takes time. It's a long, slow process. And this is one of the characteristics and the features of this class of hormones. Okay? So, yeah, because it requires this new protein synthesis, the onset is slow, but the effects are sustained over hours to days and maybe more. Okay? Okay. Now, the third class, the amine class. This is basically hormones that are derived from an amino acid, okay? Thyroxine or thyroid hormones. Despite the fact that they are coming from the same amino acid, they are different chemically. And as I said, the chemical characteristic, especially the lipid or water solubility, is the determining factor about the behavior of the hormone. It's not the fact that they are derived from the same amino acid or they are all amines. That's not the determining factor. The determining factor is whether this hormone is water soluble or lipid soluble. Okay? And believe it or not, some of the hormones that are amino acid derived, the catecholamines, are water soluble. So they work through surface receptors, membrane surface receptors, and they don't need protein carrier proteins to travel in the plasma. Thyroid hormone, on the other hand, is lipid soluble, and it behaves like steroids, meaning it doesn't require a membrane surface receptor. They can cross into the through the lipid bilayer without needing a receptor, and they utilize intracellular receptors. Okay, and they exert prolonged, sustained action through gene expression. You see? So I want people to realize the important part about the chemical structure of the hormone is not the chemical origin or the class. It's the water or lipid solubility. Proteins. Okay. Now, we mentioned receptors multiple times. And we mentioned surface membrane receptors and intracellular receptors. The surface membrane receptors utilize what we call second messenger pathways. This is how they convey their message to the cell through this process of signal transduction. Okay? Signal transduction basically means a chemical attaches itself to a membrane receptor, and there is a cascade of reactions that follows this process, and it eventually results in some biochemical change within the cell, and this is called signal transduction. The signal is started by the hormone attaching itself to the cell membrane and ends by some form of reaction, biochemical reaction happening inside, and producing a new product or something like that. Okay? So now let's start by what these. Okay, so we are talking about these signal transduction pathways. The four major classes, as I said, are the GS pathway, and which is a GS coupled pathway, produces cyclic AMP. Okay, the hormones that use this pathway include TSH, ACTH, LH, FSH. Remember, all these are pituitary proteins. Glucagon, PTH, and ADH. ADH has two different types of receptors, V1 and V2. V2 receptor utilizes the GS pathway. Okay? The other pathway is called GQ coupled pathway or receptors. They activate phospholipase C, and this in turn cleaves PIP2 into IP3 and DAG. IP3 releases calcium, so this one utilizes calcium. Okay, and from the endoplasmic reticulum, and DAG and calcium together activate protein kinase C. Eventually, it results in activating a protein kinase, just like the GS pathway, but it's a different protein kinase. It's protein kinase C. And some of the hormones that utilize this pathway include the V1 receptor of ADH, oxytocin, angiotensin 2, TRH, GnRH, and so on. The third pathway is called the RTK pathway. This is the pathway that's utilized by insulin and insulin growth factor 1. They bind to this receptor tyrosine kinases, and the receptor itself has enzymatic activity. So the configuration change will result in the receptor morphs into an enzyme. So it phosphorylates tyrosine residues on itself and on downstream substrates. This activates PI3K and MAPK cascades, mediating glucose uptake, protein synthesis, and cell growth. Note carefully, insulin's receptor is not a G protein coupled receptor. This distinction is very important for the USMLE. It's a tyrosine kinase receptor, okay? It's not G protein coupled receptor, not GS, not GQ. It's a different sort of receptors. This is very important. The last one is called JAK-STAT circuit. I don't want you to focus on the names and the abbreviations. It's just, it's important for us to understand the different types. And I promise I will make a video about cellular communication and these receptors, it's their different types and the signal transduction. So it will be a full video about this topic. For now, I just want you to familiarize yourself with these 4 important types of receptors. So this JAK-STAT use the hormones that uses it are growth hormone, prolactin, erythropoietin. They bind cytokine-like receptors that recruit Janus kinase, which is JAK. JAK phosphorylates STAT proteins and signal transducers and activators of the transcription, which then dimerize, enter the nucleus, and directly regulate gene expression. This is a direct nuclear pathway without a classic second messenger cascade. So this is an intracellular receptor actually working on the nucleus. And then we have other forms of receptors like steroid and hormone, thyroid hormone receptors. There is no second messenger. So this JAK-STAT pathway is actually an intracellular receptor. The hormone itself enters the cell, binds its receptor, and then the complex modifies gene transcription and in the nucleus directly. That's how they function. Okay, this lipid solubility and water solubility dynamic impact how hormones are transported in the blood, and lipid soluble hormones require protein transporters. So to be moving through the blood, and we mentioned that multiple times, but I think it's very important and worth repeating. If the hormone is water soluble, it can move easily. If it's lipid soluble, it needs a carrier protein. And the function or the activity of the hormone depends on the equilibrium between the free portion and the bound portion of the protein. And the free portion is the active portion.